And the idea is to kind of organize behind the clear set of demands. I feel like this, one of the things I think happens a lot is that the left and even the real left independent media that we like at times can be really good at identifying the problem and digging down to, and calling people out. And yes, when we're talking about the powerful, the uniparty, that only serves the MIC military industrial complex and the billionaires, yes, they need to be called out relentlessly. But then we have to go to that next step, the D in MCDS, the demands. Because if you're not going to that next step, like then first, why the powerful are going to give you anything? Because you're not asking for anything. Power concedes nothing without it. And also, I think there's a real danger of kind of audience fatigue. The left independent media is good at calling things out and getting people on board. But then it's kind of like you get to this place where, okay, I agree with what you're saying, but where are we going? What do we do about all this?
Cory from the Savvy Sabs podcast. Good to see you guys joining me again.
Hey. All right. Hey, JB, I just want to say you are looking good.
Thank you.
Happy to see it. Definitely.
Yeah, I was like...
good, feeling good, living your best life, right?
Well, I mean, it's like Mama said, when you got company over, you gotta make sure you're presentable for company. So I'm just sorry I don't have the Sanka coffee and the Entenmann's cakes to put out in front of y'all, but we're digital.
Sandwiches, tea time, all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I got my tea, so
yeah.
I was talking about that earlier before we went live. I was just like, man, I actually put the lemon zest in my tea this time too, so it has a really great lemon flavor. I'm thinking about making this again, but then cooling it down and making it iced tea. It's gonna be delicious. Oh, man.
Nice, that time of year.
Yes, definitely. Plus, I'm in Florida in the South. Iced tea, or as they know, sweet tea, is it's the good stuff. So, of course, everybody knows you guys. I said the 11 demands. And just for anybody who wants to know what the 11 demands are, I actually have it in a playlist on the channel. So if you guys want to, it's actually a playlist series on here as well. But as far as the 11 demands, we actually have went over the 11 demands before, which is pretty comprehensive as far as the demands for a real democracy. I actually showed this last night with our other guest, Cash, when we were talking about reparations. But just as a quick once over for people who have not heard of the 11 demands, the 11 demands for real democracy is fix big money in politics and government, healthcare for all, minimum standard of living for everyone, end the wars, respond to the climate emergency, racial and criminal justice reform, which includes reparations, reject censorship, immigration reform, elect the system we can trust, which talks about star voting and ranked choice voting, and then revamp taxation and funding and democratize the enterprise, basically workers owning the means of production. So that's just the 11 demands. But you actually wanted to go even further than that and proposing something called a pledge. If you guys can expand on that a little bit more so that we can glean from what you're throwing at us.
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing I'd say about the 11 is that when the demands, kind of the 2 through 11, right after the first one, those are kind of the concrete things that we need, and it's this idea that you have to have clear demands, right? If you're gonna have a protest, if you're gonna have a strike, you have to have clear demands. And what I found, and I think people will find generally what happens is that when you start demanding these things, you go through 2 through 11 and whatnot, you always come back to the same issue. Our government is implacably corrupt and won't give us the things we need. They're bought off. And so what happens is every time you go to one of these, you always end up back at demand number 1, which is to decorrupt the government. You have to, they work for the billionaires, the mega corporations, and, until you fix that big money, it's not going to get better. However, if you do fix that big money, it does get better. So then we get to the point where, okay, Eric, or 11 Demands people, you've got this great set of demands, but demands without power behind them, right? What good are they? So then we get to the next step, and this is getting back to what you were leading with. And the most recent Substack post, right? It's called "The Core Problem, the Challenge, and the Solution." The biggest thing I would posit in that is the middle one, the challenge. What is the biggest challenge for having this stuff go somewhere, having these demands mean something? And I think where you end up with when you do, and this talks about doing a root cause analysis and get to the root cause and how do we do this? The biggest challenge is the numbers, the people. We have to figure out a way to inspire literally millions of people to start thinking this way and having a demand-based movement to have this happen, to have this turn into a real thing. If we can do that, some incredible things are possible, I think. If we can't do that, then we're really just going to stay the microscopic little left people that we are. So that's kind of what I've come to recently. The big challenge is, how do we inspire those millions of people? And so then 11 Demands Pledge and 11 Demands Collective is about that. It's about, can we form this core group of people who believe in the demands, the idea, that are ready to frame things as MCDS, money, corruption, demand solutions, and spread the word and get that out there and be the spark that turns into something bigger. And so I would encourage everyone to check out 11 Demands in this and the pledge. If it makes sense to you, then what you do is you put your name in there and you end up as a member of the 11 Demands Collective. It's not a paid thing. It's not even a club or an org. It's more of a thought collective, at least at this point. We'll see where we go. But the idea is to be in that frame of mind and to be spreading that word and try to make this into something real. So that's what being a member of the 11 Demands Collective is about. And the pledge is kind of the way in. And it's all on the site, 11demands.org. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and the other thing is really, the framework to build around, and it can be applied in different ways. Like Sabrina, UJB, and RBN at large, definitely focuses on the importance of local organizing and doing things like ballot initiatives. And so, the framework of the 11 Demands Collective, really, it's, as Eric kind of alluded to, it's a living work in progress, and we are looking for people to collaborate and to be part of that. I just generally overall believe that we're all equal in this, and we're all stuck in this system, and we have to work with each other to get out of it, or else we won't.
And you do have to check a box that says you're not a robot.
So I just want to go over this pledge really quick, just so that people are familiarized themselves with it, so that they can, when you do go into it, you guys know exactly what it says. So it's the 11 Demands Pledge. It says, as a member of the 11 Demands Collective, I pledge to educate people on the deep corruption in the system and how it crosses partisan and ideological lines. Identify the core problem that must be addressed: big money in politics and government. Call out our so-called representatives as servants of the top 0.1% and demand revolutionary reforms. Describe the solutions as outlined in demand number 1. Spread the word about 11 Demands, MCDS, money, corruption, demands solutions. It says our goal is to reach a critical mass of people thinking this way and demanding an end to the corruption. A broad movement that is too big to ignore. Take the pledge to join the 11 Demands Collective. Enter your name below, and it will be added to the members page. And so you can put your name. You can also put your URL for your website as well, and then just send. And so it's pretty simple, but it also talks about the demands that we were basically highlighting. And you were a lot of times people, you bring these demands up to people. People across the political spectrum would be on board for a lot of these things. I would probably say, at least a good 60 to 70% of the demands would be people would be on board with, especially getting money out of politics, especially. So, I mean, this is why I think it would be, advantageous for people, if they were to, especially those of us in independent media, because the thing is like, we're already doing this, so, is it really any skin off our back? No, because we're already doing it, right? So I think it's great because you're trying to reach a critical mass of people, in that regard.
And the idea is to kind of organize behind the clear set of demands. I feel like this, one of the things I think happens a lot is that the left and even the real left independent media that we like at times can be really good at identifying the problem and digging down to, and calling people out. And yes, when we're talking about the powerful, the uniparty, that only serves the MIC military industrial complex and the billionaires, yes, they need to be called out relentlessly. But then we have to go to that next step, the D in MCDS, the demands, because if you're not going to that next step, like then first, why the powerful going to give you anything? Because you're not asking for anything. Power concedes nothing without it. And also, I think there's a real danger of kind of audience fatigue. The left independent media is good at calling things out and getting people on board. But then it's kind of like you get to this place where, okay, I agree with what you're saying, but where are we going? What do we do about all this? And, and then we have things like the fake movements that are really like a lot of the anti-Trump stuff these days is just orange man bad and doesn't talk about the deep corruption in both parties.
Yeah.
So, that's where the demands get you. It gets you past that potentially.
Yeah.
So that's the concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to just specify for the 11 Demands Collective, if you choose to sign up for the website, which we would love for you to do, you do not have to use your government name. Use whatever moniker you want.
Okay, great. One of the things that I wanted to also add to your point was I keep thinking about, for instance, the Occupy Wall Street, protest. And on top of that, it was the Occupy Wall Street protest where there wasn't really a huge set of demands that were made. You think about back to the BLM protest back in 2020, there was no real concrete set list of demands that were, agreed upon by the masses in order to be able to have real police reform. And now, even just recently, as the ICE protest or the No Kings protest that they just had over the weekend, what real set of demands were there outside of saying, oh, Trump is bad? You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the biggest issues that I have with a lot of these things, because the problem I see, especially these days, is that mobilization is easy. And I'm gonna be honest with you, and this is going to sound somewhat pessimistic, but stay with me. Getting out into the streets with signs and marching, that's good, but that's the easy part. What's difficult is doing the unsexy work of actually organizing on the ground, behind the scenes, doing things that people won't really recognize you much for. And so it's funny because over the weekend, I was helping out a mutual aid group here in Orlando, and we were helping out with their farm, which they use to feed groups and do mutual aid. And one of the things that we actually did was we actually went over some excerpts from Audre Lorde's book, Learning from the 60s. And just to, go over just a little bit. So Audre Lorde said, as Black people, if there's one thing we can learn from the 60s, is how infinitely complex any move for liberation must be. where we must move against not only those forces which dehumanize us from the outside, but also against the oppressive values which we have been forced to take into ourselves. Through examining the combination of our triumphs and errors, we can examine the dangers of an incomplete vision, not to condemn that vision, but to alter it, construct templates for possible futures, and focus our rage for change upon our enemies rather than upon each other. In the 1960s, the awakened anger of the Black community was often expressed, not vertically against the corruption of power and true sources of control over our lives, but horizontally toward those closest to us who mirrored our own impotence. So really, and she goes over that, not only organizing, but also organizing with people who we may not have complete agreement with. I think, having a set list of demands where everybody can agree on with those demands, and we may have, different, like for instance, Cory could like pineapple on his pizza. And I may think that's the most horrible thing in the world. And that's where we differ. Like in another universe, I'd probably slam the door in Cory's face for liking pineapple on pizza. But because he agrees on the list of demands, right, then we can come together and, work on these things. And so
unifying the big stuff.
But, that's the point. And I think having a clear list of demands also assists with that.
Yeah, it's this idea of demands come first, right? But if you look at when people have gotten in the streets and we've seen these movements come up, it tends to happen because there is some version of a clear demand. When we saw the big PLS, when we saw the big BLM protests get into the streets, I would submit what the reason that happened, the spark for that was that people really couldn't, people were appalled when they looked at their screens and saw a police officer killing an unarmed Black man, George Floyd, and that motivated people. And, it was, I would say that there was a basic demand underlying that. And, the demand was cops stop killing unarmed Black men. and that motivated people. The problem was it didn't go beyond that, right? It didn't get into what are the systemic causes of that. It didn't get into clear demands of how do we fix those things, and then digging even deeper, right? What's the problem in the system? How do we fix the system? And when you do those things, when you dig down to the root causes, you always come back to a corrupt government. It needs to be our government representing the 99%, and not representing, the billionaires. When Bernie took off, and, in retrospect, there's a lot of, what would you call it? Mixed bad feelings about Bernie. It doesn't seem like he was ever really real, but he does show an example. The Bernie movement shows an example of what can happen. And the reason Bernie took off was because his voice was so unusual and unique when he talked about the billionaires and the oligarchy. And yeah, they're trying to rekindle that now. And of course, Bernie's game is to talk about all that and do all that, and then redirect it back into the Democratic Party, into the uniparty. And that's what we need to prevent. But the lesson to learn is that it's possible to have a big movement, and that comes from those clear demands, directions of what needs to be done. And we've seen, different versions of that. And the recent protests for Gaza, for free Palestine, for those things, there is this clear underlying demand. I mean, not only stop, killing innocent people in Gaza, but to actually give real rights to the Palestinians, to give them their due is kind of the clear underlying demand there. And that has funded, that has fueled a lot of energy. So, it's possible to have something big happen, but I would submit that it has to start with clear demands and go from there.
There need to be actionable demands. Circling back to the BLM movement as an example, the buzz phrase was defund the police, which in a general sense I definitely agree with, but it's not really actionable. It doesn't really specify something. So like in an example like that, actionable demand would have been, let's say you're a city and you're outside the mayor's office and heckling the mayor every day to fire the police chief. Fire the police chief is an actionable demand. Defund the police is not really. I'm just using this as an example, but the demands need to be specific. They need
And
to be
another one
very,
would be to
very,
have a civilian review board for police with real power.
right. You have to have something very specific to demand, or else it runs the risk of becoming a hashtag, and that's it.
Yeah, especially when it comes to this actually goes into one of my questions as well, because demands are great, but demands without consequences, to me, is really just a request. So what consequences will be laid out for people, especially elected officials, if these demands are not met?
So that's where the numbers come in, right?
Mhm.
If we don't have big numbers, then there's really not a lot we can do.
Yeah.
And so that's why that is that key challenge. If this thing starts taking off and starts growing, either this
Mhm.
concept or one like it, I'd like to see it become kind of like a mind virus where, people are telling other people and just this concept is spreading. We need a movement based on a clear set of actionable items.
Mhm.
Um, what 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 would need to happen would be to be getting literally in the streets, right? To start in with direct actions,
Mhm.
of saying, okay, here's our 11 demands. We're not going to, not only are we not going to vote for you, politician, and your friends, your corrupt friends in the uniparty. First thing, we're going to call you out relentlessly everywhere, but we're going to be in the streets and mucking things up. It gets into the idea of strikes and general strikes, but it's going to have to start getting big and getting loud is what
Mhm.
needs to happen. Now, it seems far-fetched, right, that anything like this could really happen. But, again, we have been seeing it. We've been seeing signs of it with the Free Palestine movement. That generated a lot of energy and got people in the streets. And we need to get into things like that, but wider and bigger.
Mhm.
You know, the thing is, and I don't mean this in a, necessarily like a spicy way, but they need to be afraid of the public a lot more than they are now.
Mhm.
And so the rallying cry is to create that coalition that they would be actually afraid of in terms of accountability, because as it stands right now, they're laughing at us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so in a practical sense, it can be, getting so many people together doing so much that it mucks up the works of the society, of business, right? It gets on the news. It becomes, a big thing. And in an electoral way, I think one could make the argument that a big part of the reason why Kamala Harris lost that election was because of the Palestine issue,
Mhm.
right? That was a clear demand. She had no interest in acceding to that demand, and it cost her electorally. And that's really all that, part of this whole thing is the realization that we are literally ruled by monsters. That these people in the uniparty, in these offices, especially at the federal level, they're monstrous. I mean, they don't care
They're
about
trying
us.
extra hard to kill us all right now. So
There you go. And so, I would never advocate violence or anything close to that, but I would advocate um, general strikes, getting in the streets, getting in, and mucking up the works and becoming such a problem that it has to be dealt with, that it has to be acceded to. And of course, electorally, um, what we'd like to see would be to make it impossible for anyone to get elected if they're not on board with the demands. That's the level that you want to be getting to, you know, and make them electorally afraid of us, for starters.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's up to us, really. We can't be looking for heroes and leaders out there. There are a few that are good enough to take that mantle, but it's really up to us, every one of us, to
Yeah.
be spreading the word and to be pushing this and to be figuring out as a collective, as a consensus, how can we move this forward and grow this thing? That's the big challenge.
Yeah. So how do you square the circle, or how do you combine this with doing mutual aid on the ground? Like how would this come together with that?
One of the, I would say, an education component,
Hmm.
in that I'd like to see a connection in that, and I believe this was the Black Panthers model, was that not only it wasn't just about giving people stuff or helping people with stuff, it was also about the education. It was about, what is this all about? And so I think the 11 demands and the whole thing around that can help with that education aspect of saying, okay, we're trying to make this whole thing be part of a larger movement. And if you want to see what this larger movement is about, well, here's this clear list of demands of what we're shooting for. If you look on the 11 Demands Substack, I think there's kind of a growing library on there of articles that dig into what this is about and what we're trying to do. So I would see trying to make that kind of connection would be a good way to go.
Okay. Yeah. Because one of the things that I think that is the best thing is combine it with mutual aid, because mutual aid really is more than just giving things away to the people who need it. It's also using the education in order to be able to help the people to understand that why the system is the way it is and what can be done to help change the system. And this sounds like you're giving them the tools or the information of what could be, what we could have, even further beyond what they can see with their own eyes. It kind of makes me think of the quote they said that says, "A person can see the end of the world before they see the end of capitalism." Well, you're kind of giving them the glasses, so to speak, to say, "Hey, you can't see this now, but look through this lens and then tell me what you see." And so then they get to see something that's more egalitarian and equitable for people, especially in their different circumstances. And this is one of the things that we were talking about last night with Cash, is that when people start to see different groups or collectively that we have a win, then it wakes people up and they go, well, wait, if we're able to achieve this, what else can we do? And so do we really need the system at all? Can we rebuild it anew? Because this system is, for all intents and purposes, is old. The lifetime of an empire is typically around 250 years. We're at 249. So I think out with the old and with the new, I think it's time for, it's kind of like I think it's kind of like in Iron Man 2 when Tony Stark said, prepare, Jarvis, we're going into hardware mode, and he started knocking down walls, right? It's the same thing. We gotta start knocking down walls and renovate, right, the country from the foundation up. And I think that this gives you people the idea of what could be.
One of the key words I would say in all this is democracy. And one of the things that I think we have allowed the corporate oligarchy to do is to kind of muck with what that really means. Mm-hmm. And of course, we have this, Republican and Democratic parties that are anything but, real democracy. Mm-hmm. And, I think we need to come back to some of these core issues and really say, whenever you have any organization of thousands and millions of people, right? How do you organize that? How do you make decisions? How does that function as a group? And there really is only one way that if it's going to be fair, if it's not going to be a dictatorship, it has to be some version of democracy. There really just is no other way. And so I would submit a big part of the task of what any left or populist left, any kind of big movement is trying to do is to actually democratize our government, to turn it finally into that real democracy that really represents the people. And so that's kind of why it's called, 11 Demands for Real Democracy, is getting back to that. Like right now we have a democracy of dollars, right? The more dollars you have, the more votes you have. And so, there really is no other clear path, that I can see to fixing it, other than to fixing that core problem. Now it's a difficult road. It's a difficult task. It's a long shot to really that we're going to get anywhere with this. But then what is the alternate path that's more likely? What is the other route that's going to fix this stuff? If someone has that, I'm all ears. But I think this kind of path of focusing on these clear action items known as the demands. The other big one I'll put out there is MCDS, right? The MCDS framework, money, corruption, demand, solutions. I think if you take any given issue and put it in that framework, you get to a path that can get you somewhere if we can figure out or get through that key challenge of how do we get the numbers, right? How do we get enough people focused on that page, on that same page, focusing, on that path of how we get there. And so that's why, I keep coming back to it, right? As the key challenge, and I would say the way through that challenge is that it's up to us to be the spark, to be the core of this, and to spread it out and to just keep at it. But one thing, individually that anyone can do is to apply that MCDS to any given problem. So let's take like what's happening, in Palestine, right? I would submit you put that in the MCDS framework. You start with the money, right? What Israel is doing, it's a genocidal land grab at its core, right? Israel just wants all the land, all the resources, and they're ruthless about getting it. Why is that allowed to happen? Why does our government let that happen? Well, it's because our government is corrupt, the C to the MC. But, and we definitely need to call that out and relentlessly. But the big thing is we can't stop there. I feel like a lot of times, even people that I like on the left, when they talk about things, they get to that point, but then they kind of stop there. And so the next key part of that framework is to get to the D, the demand, because then you're saying, well, what is our demand? Well, our demand is that it stop, right? The war stop. But you get into like, well, why is that war and those things really happening? Well, it's because of the money and corruption, right? It ties back to, all wars are resource wars. Every bomb dropped, all these weapon systems, the Iron Dome. I mean, my joke is with the Iron Dome, right? The Iron Dome, it's not good at stopping missiles, but there is one thing that the Iron Dome is really, really good at, and that's making money for the MIC, for the defense contractors. The Iron Dome's really good at doing that. And so you have that recognition of what's really going on here. It's about the money and corruption. So then your demand, your first demand is to stop the wars, and then that leads to the core demand of decorrupt the government, get the money and the corruption out of there, and then that demand is tied into your solution, into the solution in this, in that we have to fix the money. We have to get into those real concrete steps of how we do that. We have to have masses of people in the streets demanding that we do that. End the corruption, fix the money, have a government that represents us instead of the current government that represents the corporate oligarchy and the war machine. That I think is the core.
Yeah, definitely. I do have a question in the chat that I would like to get into. Jacqueline asks, what about a massive consumer boycott to coincide with the general strike?
Definitely.
I love it.
Let's work on that. One of the parts, in doing all this stuff would be to be talking about these things, almost kind of workshopping these things, and how do we get from there to there. And it's always going to be down to the numbers. Can we get this thing big enough? So if you get a few million people in the streets, then all of a sudden anything becomes possible.
I mean, everybody's angry, right? I mean, both sides, all different ideologies, lots of anger. How do we rally that? Moment. How do we bring it together? I'm not going to claim to have, some magic answer to it, but, our attempt in doing this is to try to build that anger around this framework and try to turn that into actionable items. Hopefully we can help and do that.
Yeah, I think it also in coinciding with helping people, to understand, how necessary this is. I'm losing my thought because I'm getting old. But as far as, encouraging people to embrace this, of course, you can go on different shows like mine, and of course, Savvy, she has a much bigger net than I do. But as far as getting this out there, how can we spread the word even further for this? Because a lot of people tend to be more stuck on, oh, we got to stay within the duopoly. We got to just vote our way out of this. And we have to choose between either dying by fire or dying by drowning, but we have to choose one. How do you kind of wrestle that mindset, from the people, and have them start looking for something that is actually more life-giving?
Yeah, I mean, it is, I guess it would be the hope of us for people that choose to take the 11 Demands pledge, which one of those pledges is to speak to your neighbors, speak to your friends, speak to your family, because really that's what's going to get through to people is when they hear think about it this way, the Republicans, they always go pro LGBT when their son or daughter comes out or whatever. It needs to be personal to people. And so what I would say to that is, if it's coming from somebody that you care about, coming from your buddy, coming from whoever, you're much more likely to get on board with any of these things. So that's really our hope is that people that like this and want to take that pledge will do so.
And we can all have a role to play, right? Even someone with just a few friends, right, can talk to those friends about it and say, check this thing out. Let's try spreading the word. If you're online, if you're in chat on somebody's show, you can be saying, well, one of the biggest things, right, that you can just put in the chat that I'll just put in sometimes is, what are our demands? If a lefty host is talking about something, or any kind of host is talking about something, and they're laying out, okay, this sucks and they suck and this thing is terrible and whatnot. Okay, then what is the demand? So anyone who's in the collective can be in the chat and doing that. If they're on Zoom calls or whatnot, put it into that. What is our demand? Of course, anyone who's a host, of course, we want on board, and we'd love to see really putting it in that framework and talking about it and highlighting it and saying, look, let's take a shot at this, at getting together behind this clear set of demands and making this a thing. If someone is running for office, of course, and I think we have some really good Green Party candidates running. Andy Ellis, who's one I definitely highlight because he has signed on to 11 Demands Collective. His name is right on there, and we can we can show the list of who's in there so far. So anybody like that, we can have discussions with and whatnot, and make sure that they're on board with it, and that it's a consensus these ideas of how it comes together. And yeah, so it's really up to us. The other thing we can be working on is having live streams and having kind of workshopping streams is something that Cory and I have been kicking around, the idea of how to do that and how to have something like that work, and just yeah, it's these different ways, and it's how do we spread the word, how do we get something going and make it real. The whole thing is designed to kind of run on consensus. So, we're always looking for ideas and input. One place also that these kind of discussions can happen is on Sabby Sab's show. About once a week, we do the Zoom hangout call-in after the show, and we can be discussing things there. So if people want to have ideas and they want to, talk them out, get in touch with us, or questions, that's also a good place for that.
Yeah, I think I also view it just as a personal challenge to keep fighting, keep doing something. Eric is a lot more optimistic than me. I am constantly fighting apathy and cynicism. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But yeah, we just got to keep fighting, and this is our way of doing it. And we hope that other people are interested in it also.
I think that's one of the things, is keeping our revolutionary optimism, because I think that is what's most important. A lot of times we get stuck in the apathy and cynicism because, right, the night is darkest before the dawn, right? And I think one of the best ways is, and maybe people will look at me like, you're looking through rose-colored glasses, but it is what it is. I fantasize about high-speed rail. I fantasize about everybody being housed. I literally fantasize about being able to go on vacation and sip a nice cool drink on the beach of Gaza. I fantasize about stuff like that. You know what I mean? And don't be afraid to fantasize about a better future. Because my thing is like, yes, our anger is good in order to give us that energy to drive us to do something better, but also our joy and our happiness can also drive us too. I say utilize both in order to be able to push us forward. So sometimes our hopes and our dreams are also just as good of a fuel to push us for something better. Because I would love to see a nationalized healthcare system, right? And I imagine what that would look like. So sometimes our imagination is something that could be a useful tool. Now I'm starting to sound like Mr. Rogers, but go into the world of imagination.
Make it a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
No, it's important, because these things are possible. We have enough wealth, resources, technology to have everybody have a good standard of living. I also totally agree with you on that. It's just as far as car culture and the way that our cities and towns are built, dependent on cars and no public transit. That's a big thing. I'm very jealous of the rail system in Japan. But yeah, these things are absolutely possible. But not so long as we have these, resource hoarding, sociopathic billionaires. So that gets down into, the money and the corruption being the first thing that we target and the thing that we always come back to.
Like, we can all have nice things, or we can have billionaires. So, it's time to make the choice. And I think it's important as kind of a lefty movement that we do paint that picture of what does a better world look like. Yes, we have to call out everything that's bad and be very critical and be relentless when it comes to calling out that money and corruption. But then we also have to say, what does a better world look like? I think that a lot of what's in 11 Demands, paints that picture. We're demanding these things. And, one way I think of framing it that can perhaps give us hope is that as terrible as our government is right now, And it is just I think we've all, anyone who's been paying attention the last few years is really pretty amazed at how bad it's gotten. Like just the level of just terribleness, whether it's Gaza, whether it's the healthcare system, whether it's the way the politics operates and whatnot. So right now our government is terrible. Our government is basically an evil actor, an evil force in the world, right? It is that bad. I mean, that's part of this whole thing is kind of making sure that people know, yeah, no, it is that bad. Conversely, if we can climb this mountain, if we can get to this point where our government flips and becomes a government that does represent the people, that isn't totally corrupt, that government that operates that way, that's really working for the 99%, could do incredible things. that government could look after everyone. You talk about in the 11 demands, a minimum standard of living, a government operating for us and not the billionaires could do that easily. And homelessness, have a real healthcare system. The resources are there. It's sitting right there waiting for us. That government would become a good force in the world that would stop wars from happening, that would feed people, that would resource people in the world with real sources, not loans. And so I think that's the hope. That's the vision to paint, that it is possible to flip it. And if we do flip it, anything becomes possible.
Yeah, definitely. I want to share this really quick video because when I saw this earlier today, it made me think of, instead of being in despair, wishing something positive upon the people who are around us. And I just wanted to share this. It will tug at your heartstrings, but I think that when I see this kid, I dream of a much better future instead of being sad. Number one, I hope that this kid gets, the help that they need. But I also want them to have a much brighter future, which can be provided by those of us who are adults. So I just want to share this really quick. This is about, this kid is just talking about being homeless at 17.
Oh no, I ain't been speaking out on it or nothing like that. But right now, folks, I'm homeless at 17. And I don't know if I can tell folks, but I'm crying right now because I got mixed emotions. I don't know if I want to cry or laugh right now. Like y'all know, I'm a kid right now, and my family ain't always been in the best financial situation. So, I ain't always had everything or whatever growing up, everything I wanted. So once I got my hands on some little money, I was trying to help. You see what I'm saying? I'm trying to help everybody. Ain't nobody trying to help me, bro. I'm out here alone. I ain't even had no time to think about what's going on in my life. I just gotta stay on the move, bro. Every day, I gotta figure out, folks, where I'm finna lay my head at, bitch, where I'm finna eat, where I gotta do this and all that, folks. I ain't even had no time to think. I'm just not thinking about this shit. I've been homeless for about what? About damn near a week now. I'm just not crying about the shit. I ain't had no time to even develop my feelings for this shit, folks. I just gotta keep going. Even family, friends, and all. Even my family, some of them know I don't got nowhere to go, folks. Where y'all think I'm finna go? I'm 17, y'all. What the fuck y'all think I'm finna do? What I'm supposed to do out here? I gotta depend on somebody till at least next year so I could get a house in my name. I can't even do that right now. I'm fucked. I hate that I had to be put in this position. Like, why I had to be born into this shit? I ain't do shit wrong to nobody. Alone, folks. I'm alone, folks. I don't got nobody to talk to about shit. I can't go to nobody and talk to them about nothing, folks. Real life. Just gotta deal with this shit, folks. I just gotta deal with it, bro. And that motherfucker always got so much to say, bro. And they don't know my position, folks. They don't know my shit, folks. So for y'all who don't know.
So
yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking, and society is failing that young man and many young men. It just speaks to the deep evil sociopathy. Also, homelessness is a trap. Once you are homeless, it is extremely hard to get out of that. I've done homeless outreach and stuff for work. If you deal with a lot of unhoused people and you talk to them, you'll find that they have had different housing placements over time. They always get bounced at. Once you're in that kind of, underclass, let's call it, you really can't get out. You can't even get a government ID without having an address. That's something very, very difficult for unhoused people that don't have an ID. Also, unhoused people are dealing with people on the streets that might have their own issues, violence, getting their stuff taken all the time. It is just a complete and absolute trap. And yeah, it's really fucked. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the reason why I wanted to show that is because this is the reality. And somebody will look at him and say, well, you're a young man. Go ahead and get a job and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Not thinking about what he just said, that he can't even get himself a place to live until he's 18. What about the mental health of this young man? June is not only Pride Month, but it's also mental health awareness month. What about that boy? You know what I mean? A nationalized healthcare system would be there to make sure that his mental health is in check. These lists of demands that are put out would make sure that this young man doesn't ever have to worry about food, housing, transportation, things like that. And so it's using experiences like that young man as fuel to push for something better. Because a lot of times, those of us who have been through what he's going through, trust me, I know, let your compassion be your fuel. That's what I said. Let your compassion be your fuel. Because, it's definitely not what's fueling the corporate dictators, the oligarchs. There's no compassion there. Or if they think it is, it's some perverted version that they think it is when it really isn't. If you guys have time, I do have a question to share with you guys.
Sure.
Okay, so this one's from Roger, our good friend Roger Meadows. He actually asked this question. He said, question, which route do you plan on taking to get the amendment through Congress, passing it with a 2/3 in both chambers and sending it to the states with 38 states signing off on ratification, or 2, start and end it with the states with an Article 5 Constitutional Convention of the states calling for the convention, proposing it to the states and 38 states ratifying it? Which one do you choose? What is the plan to get there?
So, I mean, one of the things that I think is we need to be wary of is getting too caught up in the details, or too caught up in the particular tools of how this happens. Yeah, a constitutional amendment by either path is a big lift, and it always comes back to the same thing. Either of those paths are very difficult that Roger talks about. Those are the two ways that you can get an amendment done, and this would tie into a major part of fixing the money and corruption is the move to amendment style constitutional amendment to say money's not speech, money's not speech, corporations are not people. And that would open up the door to a lot of campaign finance management and whatnot. If we can get enough people on board and turn this into a large, millions of people, large movement, then either one of those paths are possible. We can be pursuing, one or both. Move to amend. The organization is out there, working on this. We can be working with them. I think personally, I think they need to be a little more hard nosed about what they're doing. But there's, their amendment is really good. But we need the number. It comes back to the numbers. Like you need to build this thing up. If we don't, do that, then it doesn't really matter which path we're choosing, because neither is going to happen if we don't have the numbers. If we do have the numbers, then we can be working on both paths, or form a consensus to one path or the other. We basically, need to be working on. I mean, this almost sounds kind of crazy when you come out and say it, but we basically need to be replacing every current member of Congress.
Mhm.
Like we do right now, we have 0 friends in there.
Mhm.
Now, maybe, if we get a big movement going and we start, getting better Congress people, more Greens, more independents in there, then maybe we'll see enough movement where maybe some of them, will say, okay, maybe we can support you, the 11 Demands movement, because you're on board and whatnot. Although we always look at you with a side eye, but that's the kind of politics we need to get to.
As for
So-
me, law is used to suppress people. Law is used as a weapon. Most of the time, you need a law degree to be bar admitted to even understand what's going on. I prefer not to work within their system. I think that system is rigged. I prefer to focus on civil disobedience, strikes, boycotts, getting in the streets, enforcing it that way. We're not going to win if we play within their laws. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
And we
So,
want to do both, united by the clear set of demands.
so my question to amend, part of that is, what about starting off with city council?
I think it's great. I think if people have the ability to get elected to their city council and to, go by these principles and to be, an independent voice, I think that's great.
We have the same problem at all levels of government. The money and the corruption. Like I don't think you can find a level of government in this country where the money and corruption is not a big problem. Maybe if you get down to, little towns or something, you might find where it's not as much. But basically, it's the same issue, right? It's the big money and corporate interests are using their wealth and resources to corrupt the elected lawmakers who should be representing us, so instead they represent them. So at all levels of government, it's about calling out, identifying the problem, and gathering enough people up and enough of a movement to push through real changes. And what those changes look like are laid out by the clear demands.
Yeah, it is everywhere. Where I live in Quincy, Massachusetts, they are currently spending $1 million to build a statue for the police, which could be used. Yeah, seriously. They're building a new police and fire station, and they've spent $1 million building, I think it's a St. Michael or whatever statue, patron saint of law enforcement or whatnot. That money could be spent much more judiciously somewhere else, but it just kind of brings to the point of just how it's broken at all levels.
With homeless people in the city, and they're spending money on a statue?
Yes, sir.
I guess they can sleep under the statue. Jesus.
See,
but yeah, that's how that's part of this whole thing. This is how
that's
bad
going to get me canceled on my channel. This is the type of stuff that makes me want to get deplatformed. I'm gonna keep it cool. Keep it cool. Boy,
yeah, this is part of the whole thing. This is how bad it's gotten.
Your government hates you. Your government hates you.
Yes.
Well, the people in those seats right now hate you. If we get real people who are not implacably corrupt in those seats, then you could have a government that loves you. But it's a hard lift, but that's the goal.
Yeah. So, you know what? Look, if you guys have not already, go ahead and take the demands pledge, the 11 demands pledge. Go ahead and look at the set of demands. First, go ahead and look at the set of demands first. If it's something that you can rock with, then hey, take the pledge. And then, communicate it with your family, your friends, right? Your girlfriend, the person who grooms your dog, or grooms your cat. Hey, I don't judge. If you have a cat groomer, hey, that's cool too. But the thing is ultimately is people learning, that they have more power than they realize, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, it's up to us. But like what you called out are definitely good. I mean, these is kind of the call to action at this point, is to try to see how big we can grow this. What can we do with it, and take it from there.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, and if anybody is in New England, encourage anybody to come to any of the events that Savvy Sabs puts on, or any of the mutual aid events, or we're out at different actions. So if this is the region that you live in, come on and hang out with us and get involved.
All right, pull up and pull through. Bring some supplies while you at it. Okay, thank you guys so much. Please let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you got my my website on the screen there, Eric T. Red, or especially 11 Demands. That is one thing that I'm glad it's gotten to, is that it is a kind of a brand, right? 11 Demands. You can put it out there to people. Just look up 11 Demands. It will actually come up on Google, which is pretty cool. And let's work with it, take it from there. And of course, I'll see you on Savvy's show. We'll be live tonight at 7 Eastern time.
I don't have social media. You can find me punching the air somewhere in Boston.
Or in the Savvy Sabs chat.
Same. Cory, I see you.
Got you.
All right, guys. I'll see you guys in Savvy's chat a little bit later.
All right. Peace and love,
All
JB.
right. Thanks, JB.
All right. Take care, guys.
Soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.